Hello and welcome to the first episode of the bi-monthly BV podcast for March 2025, with our lovely county showing the first signs of spring in countryside and garden. One of those signs being the spawn laid in our ponds by those creatures you'll see on the front cover of the BV magazine. Join us as we tell you of some of the things that have been happening in deepest Dorset. I'm Jenny Devitt.
And hello from me, Terry Bennett.
As ever in the first BV episode of the month, we'll be hearing in a moment from our editor, Laura Hitchcock, with her letter, and we'll have some of those you sent in to the magazine. And on the political front,
Simon Hoare, MP for North Dorset, writes about the challenges of maintaining the UK-US special relationship in the Trump era and the absolute need to stand up to bullies.
Ken Huggins of the North Dorset Green Party is very concerned about a recent court case between Wessex Water and environmental campaigner Caroline Dennett, a case she lost, and says that we consumers have no redress when our water companies fail adequately to provide the service we pay them for.
Gary Jackson of the North Dorset Lib Dems also references recent events in Washington and applauds the realisation that our armed forces need to be rebuilt quickly.
West Dorset Liberal Democrat MP Edward Morello sings the praises of Dorset's unsung heroines, the women who deserve more public recognition, he says, for their achievements, and perhaps even a statue. And on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the Dorset and Somerset Air Ambulance, Terry has been talking to their CEO, Charles Hackett. And the Dorset Insider from the BV magazine this month comes from an anonymous parish councillor very concerned about neighbourhood plans and the views of local residents and parish councillors being bulldozed aside when it comes to new developments designed to fulfil the government's housing targets. And we'll start by hearing from our editor, Laura.
You may have spotted a sudden flood of turquoise newspaper covers last month. Don't panic, it's not an optician's test and you haven't accidentally joined a cult. Publishers across the country united behind the Make It Fair campaign. It's a rather polite way of saying, listen, AI, if you're going to feast on our work, at least buy us dinner first. The issue isn't the technology itself. It's making sure that the writers, artists and creatives whose work feeds AI models are credited, valued and, radical thought, actually paid. Because AI is just a tool. Ignoring it now would be like refusing to learn about the internet in the 90s. Pointless, short-sighted and vaguely reminiscent of that one uncle who still insists email is newfangled. It's been 30 years, Uncle Ron. But like any tool, it needs to be used responsibly. The real debate isn't about what AI can do, which, let's face it, is increasingly impressive. It's what it should do and how we, as the actual humans, set the limits. Which brings me to this month's issue. Proudly powered by real breathing people. There are some stunning photos of a healing Eddie Scott in Ukraine, which were sent over by a firm in Toronto after we had chatted on Instagram. Karen at Fold Bookshop in Shaftesbury rescued me with a picture too, and Dave, the Museum of East Dorset volunteer who, with heroic last-minute efficiency, dug through the entire archives to find me the exact image I needed. I still owe him biscuits, actually. There's Desperate Kate, still without a landline, who has been at the mercy of an ever-rotating cast of BT customer support staff, all valiantly attempting to reconnect her to civilization. There's Rachel's interviews with air ambulance patients, Carol Jones finding time in launch week for a private tour of the new Vale Family Hub. This issue literally exists because people took the time to share, to help and connect. Humans are what make us, us. But that doesn't mean I don't have a pet name for my ChatGPT bot, Brian, or that it isn't a lifesaver when the sub-eds are on holiday and I cannot remember the rules on capitalising plant names.
Letters to the editor, and a number of you have been in touch on When the Last Bank Leaves Town from the BV of February 25. Arthur Jennings of Sherborne writes, I am happy with my iPad, obviously, or else I would not read the BV, but I do not and will not do my banking on an app. I like to speak to a real person when dealing with my money, not tap away on a screen and hope for the best. But with the last bank in town gone, what choice do I have? Not everyone wants or trusts online banking, and cash is still king in many parts of rural Dorset. Closing branches might be convenient for the banks, but it's a disaster for those of us who rely on them.
Margaret Thompson sent in an email on the same subject of when the last bank leaves town. The closure of our last local bank is more than an inconvenience. It's a severance of community ties. Not everyone is comfortable or capable with online banking, particularly the elderly. We must find solutions that include everyone, ensuring no one is left behind in this digital shift.
This from James Carter, whose address is supplied. As a small business owner, the loss of our local bank branch is a significant blow. Daily cash deposits and face-to-face consultations were vital. While digital banking is useful, it cannot replace the personal service that understood our community's unique needs.
Joanna Spencer of Sherborne wrote in about elderly drivers. I recently, she says, had the unnerving experience of driving behind my 80-year-old mother at dusk. What should have been a short journey quickly became a white-knuckle ride, braking erratically at every oncoming car, struggling to reverse in a single-track lane, alternating between too fast and too slow, and entirely unaware of an approaching junction. It was painfully clear she shouldn't be driving in the dark. But here's the problem. How do we broach that conversation? In rural Dorset, where there's little to no public transport, cars are lifelines for the elderly. Taking away the keys is taking away their independence. But safety has to be paramount for them and for every other road user. Watching her falter on the road, I knew the conversation couldn't be avoided, and for now we have a halfway house where she'll only drive in daylight. We need more awareness, support, and alternatives for older drivers in rural areas, and perhaps a driving test for over 75s? We wouldn't let a 16-year-old drive if they weren't competent at reversing, after all.
On the Grumblers' greenwashing land grabs from the BV of February 25, HC of Sturminster Newton writes, As a young farmer, I found the Dorset Insiders column on greenwashing land grabs refreshingly honest. Too often, developers use buzzwords like rewilding and sustainability to justify carving up farmland for projects that do little for the environment or the rural communities they displace. True sustainability means protecting working farms, supporting local food production, and ensuring that so-called green initiatives don't just serve as a front for profit-driven land grabs. If we lose productive land under the guise of environmentalism, who benefits? Certainly not farmers, wildlife, or future generations. Thank you for calling it out. More people need to.
Tom Harding from Shaftesbury wrote in about that photo competition. I was excited, he says, to see the North Dorset photography competition until I read the terms. Do entrants realise they're handing over the rights to their images for free, in perpetuity, for Dorset Council to use whenever it sees fit? Professional photographers get paid for this kind of work, yet the council has found a clever way to build a marketing library at no cost. It's particularly galling coming from a county that claims to support the arts. Photography is a skill, an art form, and, crucially, a profession. By taking advantage of enthusiastic amateurs, the council undermines those trying to make a living from their craft. If North Dorset's beauty is worth promoting, it's worth paying for. Instead of exploiting local talent, Dorset Council should invest in it.
Geoffrey Markham of Beaminster writes on the so-called dead cat on the table. My very politically aware granddaughter recently gasped in horror when I declaimed something as a dead cat. It transpired she'd never heard of the dead cat strategy. Given the times we live in, I think more people should. The idea is simple. When you're an authority in trouble, throw a metaphorical dead cat on the table, something so outrageous that everybody talks about it instead. While they're gasping at the spectacle, the real issue quietly slips by unnoticed. Next time a politician says something scandalous or a headline seems designed to provoke, don't just react, look around. What else has been announced? What policies, cuts or controversies are being buried beneath the noise? It's an old trick, but one that works best when people don't see it coming. So let's make sure we do.
Emily H. from near Sturminster Newton wrote in on 4 horses. Jess Rimmer's 4 horses, 8 tests, she said, had me laughing into my coffee. Anyone who's ever sat on a horse or fallen off one knows the chaos she so brilliantly captured. The mix of determination, disaster, and sheer equestrian lunacy was spot on. More of this, please. Dorset's riders need the laughs.
On George H. and the Beavers. I read with interest George Hosford's recent column on flood management strategies, particularly his cautious stance on beaver reintroduction. While I appreciate his concerns about potential tree damage and unpredictable flooding, it's important to note that beavers have been shown to create natural infrastructures that can mitigate flood risks by slowing water flow and enhancing wetland ecosystems. With appropriate management and strategic planning, the benefits of beaver activity can be harnessed to complement traditional flood defences. Given the increasing frequency of extreme weather events, integrating some nature-based solutions like beaver reintroduction could bolster our resilience against flooding. That's from Alexandra Green of Dorchester.
And finally, Caroline Foster wrote in an email about Mike H. I read last month's letters page with equal parts joy and frustration. What business does your correspondent, Mike H., have in teasing us so? A lifetime of music, world-class orchestras, and a trip to La Scala? Then he leaves us hanging. Please, I implore you, go back to Mr. H. and request most strongly that he tells us more. Where else has he played? What were the highlights? Which performances sent shivers down his spine? And most importantly, what did he love to play? A Dorset gem like this must not be left to retire quietly into nature watching without sharing more of his remarkable story.
Playing a dangerous game. As Trump unsettles NATO and offends allies, Simon Hoare MP looks at the strained special relationship and why the West must remain united against Putin. Many people will have had a hope that the second Trump administration might have been different from his first, that a greater sense of calmness and grown-up politics would be to the fore. Any vestige of that hope was shattered in the Oval Office and the disgraceful treatment of the Ukrainian president. If that is how this administration treats its allies, then God help us all. Of course, this came hot on the heels of the Vice President's sermon on free speech and democratic liberty delivered at the Munich Security Conference. An arrogant speech, undoubtedly. Ill-advised, 100%. Cowardly, without a shadow of doubt. I say cowardly because I do not think he would have had the spine to make the same speech in Beijing, Tehran, Moscow or Pyongyang. There is a lot of conspiracy theory speculation circulating currently concerning Trump's status with the Russian authorities. I am not a conspiracy theorist. What I do know, however, is that with the president's tactic of let's unsettle NATO and offend our neighbours and allies, the only person who benefits, in geopolitical terms, is dictator Putin. Russia always benefits when the West is divided and uncertain. We are certainly that at the moment. We will all be familiar with the idea of the special relationship between the UK and the US. It has been strong and enduring. It can be, and it has been, special without there being continued agreement on every subject. For example, the Suez, Grenada, and initially the Falklands. It does, however, need to be based on an enduring trust, and that, I believe, is now being eroded significantly. Many of us recognise that classic relationship conversation. We want different things. We've changed. We're not who we were X years ago. Let's hope it's not the case, but the UK and US may be heading for a similar heart-to-heart. Just because it's lasted doesn't mean it's built to last forever. Many North Dorset homes and hearts were opened to Ukrainians following Putin's unprovoked and unwarranted invasion. I well remember seeing the tsunami of generosity at Sturminster's Exchange as I helped pack donations of clothes, food and bedding. It was deeply heartwarming. It remains as clear today as it did those 3 long years ago. To end the fighting is easy. Russia has only to withdraw her troops and respect the sovereign boundaries of Ukraine. Contrary to the Trump philosophy, the moves cannot come only from Ukraine, and I cheered when President Zelensky stood firm against the White House bully boys. The House of Commons has responded magnificently, with the exception of the Trump-Putin hero-worshipping reform. A laser-like focus on stronger defence policies, increased defence spending, total support for the Ukrainian people, and vocal opposition to the Russian regime. Our Prime Minister, with whom I have many policy disagreements, has led the international response, carrying on that role which his predecessors had. As we move forward, he will have both my support and that of my party in pursuit of the core principles we all share. Failure to do so would be to play into Putin's hands, and humanity would be the loser.
Wessex water court case should worry us all, writes Ken Huggins of the North Dorset Green Party. Question: if you pay someone to do a job and they don't complete it, should you be able to refuse to pay the whole bill? If you think, yes, of course, then you might be interested in the recent small claims court action by Wessex Water against Caroline Dennett, one of Dorset's hardest working and most inspiring environmental campaigners. Caroline has been refusing to pay the sewage treatment element of her water bill on the basis that Wessex Water has obviously failed to adequately provide that service. Unusually for a small claims court hearing, Wessex Water chose to have a barrister present their case. The judge was complimentary about Caroline's presentation of her own defence, and she was sympathetic to Caroline's arguments. She also refused to award costs against her, but ultimately had to conclude that she had no option in law other than to uphold Wessex Water's claim for payment of the withheld money. So, we consumers have no redress when our water company fails to adequately provide the service we pay them for. And because they have a monopoly, there are no alternative suppliers we can turn to. Unless and until the industry is properly regulated, the UK's water privatisation rip-off will continue. More than 70% of UK water company shareholders are now foreign interests. Wessex Water itself is 100% owned by a Malaysian infrastructure conglomerate. The 10 privatised water companies established in 1989 were effectively debt-free. They now have debts of more than 60 billion, while over 80 billion has been paid out to shareholders. And all the while, sewage has increasingly fouled our precious watercourses and beaches. If more of its customers temporarily withheld payment for the waste treatment part of their water bills, the pressure might encourage Wessex Water to fulfil its contract with us. What do you think? Some farming methods also cause gross pollution of our waterways, for example, factory farm chickens. But here, fortunately, we consumers do have a choice. Cheap chicken doesn't pay for the huge damage it does to our environment, damage that one way or another we all pay for. So we can choose not to eat it, can we not?
The Donald in Wonderland, Gary Jackson of the North Dorset Liberal Democrats writes as follows. Events were moving very fast the first weekend of March as the diplomatic bromance between PM Starmer and President Trump turned into the undiplomatic made-for-TV mugging of President Zelensky in the Oval Office. What has happened to the land of the free? We can only speculate about the motives and strategy of the so-called leader of the free world. In my view, there is rarely strategy to Trump. He seeks only TV ratings, cutting real estate deals over the heads of affected people, and above all, avoiding blame. Avoiding blame seems to be a significant motivator as Trump works in his unethical way to ensuring he can blame Zelensky and the Europeans for any failure to secure peace in Ukraine. Trump made hay with Biden's disastrous exit from Afghanistan, and he will want to set up scapegoats for anything that looks remotely like failure. The public mauling of Zelensky at the White House needs to be seen in the same way that, for all the tactile patting and public grooming by Starmer and Macron of Trump the gorilla, the two European chimps still left their respective tea parties with no guarantees of US support from the Donald, but at least Europe and allies are working on a plan. Never mind the tea party, we need to smell the coffee. Like far too many professional soldiers in recent years, I started to believe fashionable military talk of hybrid warfare, sub-threshold effects, cyber and influence operations that would make so-called sunset capabilities irrelevant. But there was always the nagging question of, does clever tech really beat artillery? I well recall the visiting US Marine Corps general who asked my staff college cohort to remember that a virtual presence is an actual absence. We need to rebuild our forces quickly with lots of good, not gold-plated, equipment and stocks. We need to do it with allies to get best value for money and cut duplication. We need to recruit talent and retain experience. And we need to be prepared to make savings and pay more to achieve these things, even if the first full cut did not need to choke off international aid. Previous generations spent 8% of GDP on rearming in the years before 1939, and that was too little to deter our enemy. We are beyond the looking glass in the politics of Donald in Wonderland, where everything has been turned on its head. Europe's enemy is Russia, but if Trump's statements and actions make us feel that he thinks Europe is his enemy, are we wrong to believe that Trump sees Putin as his like-minded friend? It's time for Europe to be strong against both the bullies in front of us and behind.
Fossils to feminism, Dorset's overlooked women, writes Edward Morello, who's the MP for West Dorset. The 8th of March was International Women's Day, and while this was a great time to win some brownie points at home by talking about my amazing and long-suffering wife, it was also an opportunity to celebrate some of the many amazing and all too often overlooked women in West Dorset's history. Mary Anning, born in Lyme Regis in 1804, is one of history's most renowned fossil hunters. Despite facing so many challenges, her discoveries changed the course of paleontology forever. Today, a statue in Lyme Regis honours her achievements, a tribute made possible through the dedication of two other amazing women, Anya Pearson and Evie Swire, a mother-daughter duo who successfully crowdfunded for the statue. Yet, despite this rich history, there has long been a glaring absence of women represented in our public spaces. Until recently, in Dorchester, there were 6 statues of men, one of a dog, one of a horse, and one of the Queen Mother, but not a single statue of a non-royal woman. This is not just about stone and metal, it's about the stories we choose to tell. Thanks to the efforts of Anya Pearson and the Dorchester Sheroes campaign, this is beginning to change, with a statue of Sylvia Townsend Warner, a 20th century novelist, poet, and pioneer for gay rights, set to be installed in the town centre. Women's contributions to West Dorset span centuries. The Dorset button makers, who influenced the livelihoods of hundreds of women and played a vital role in the region's economy. Lucy Emily Baxter, an art writer from Dorchester. Mary Mullett Moole, who worked to improve sanitation during a cholera epidemic. And Maud Steele, who was awarded the George Medal after she courageously maintained telephone services during the bombing of Sherborne in 1940. They are all part of our rich history of extraordinary women. So, on International Women's Day, let's hope that these women were celebrated. Let's continue to push for progress, to support and uplift women in every walk of life, and to ensure that when we look to the past, we see the whole story, not just half of it.
Charles Hackett is the CEO of Dorset and Somerset Air Ambulance. Charles, thank you for joining us on the BV podcast. And firstly, what is the Dorset and Somerset Air Ambulance? If that's not a really obvious question, who are you? What makes you up? What do you do?
Hello, Terry. Actually, it strangely isn't an obvious question. People often think they know exactly what an air ambulance is. It's an ambulance that's in the air. But actually, things have progressed rather, and it's a bit more complicated and slightly more complex than that. So we cover Dorset and Somerset, although we will deploy to neighbouring counties as our neighbours will back us up as well. And at this point, 25 years after we came into existence, we're more of a flying intensive care unit, bringing hospital-level care to patients than anything else. We fly now 19 hours a day, every day of the year. We use night vision goggles to fly at night. We'll fly to the nearest safe location to land, to get a specialist team to a patient, to bring them both a consultant-grade doctor and a specialist practitioner so that they can provide care that the ambulance service, otherwise the NHS, can't provide before getting into hospital. That's essentially what we do.
And I suppose some people might reasonably assume that you are an extension of the ordinary ambulance service, but that's pretty far from the truth, isn't it? I mean, you're not funded by government or the NHS at all, are you?
No, we get good support from the ambulance service, Southwest Ambulance Service, but we are essentially funded by charitable donations. So we are funded by the people of Dorset and Somerset, by quite a lot of people giving us small amounts, or people doing fundraising activities for us to cover what is getting closer to £10 million a year now to keep us operational at this level of professionalism. We work very much as part of the NHS system. We make a lot of effort to make sure we have great partnership with the ambulance service. We are integrating well into the hospitals because we're part of that chain of survival. But that piece of this level of what's called critical care pre-hospitally is purely funded by charity.
And putting this in context, in 2024, there were 2,909 incidents. That's something over 50 per week, each costing about £3,500 on average. So, everybody knows, I think, to put a helicopter in the air is not a cheap proposal. Like you say, £5 million per annum, going up a little by the sound of it to about 10. This is a pretty big undertaking, isn't it, really?
It is, and we've come in that 25 years from small initial starts. We were given a grant by actually the AA to help prime us, get us going. But back then we were available a couple of days a week in a small aircraft called a Bulco. We had a pilot and a paramedic, and we were doing a couple of 100 jobs a year. Since then, we've introduced more hours. We've gone to a dual pilot so we can fly at night. We've introduced a critical care model with the doctor and specialist. And we've gathered a set of kit that essentially miniaturizes everything you might imagine in an intensive care unit. And our aircraft is now a far more advanced and capable aircraft, allowing us to not only operate very safely at night, but in different other weather conditions, and crucially, to have the range to go and take patients to where they really need to be. In Dorset and Somerset, really, we don't have major trauma centres. So for a traumatic injury, we would often be transferring patients to Southampton or to Bristol or down to the Derriford Hospital in Plymouth, and being able to have the capability to do that. And yes, all those things stack up in cost. You mentioned earlier about £3,500 every time that particular phone goes in our base. But in the impact of what we can bring to the patient and the impact of that life-saving care, the cost is quite reasonable in comparison to other healthcare provision.
Okay, tell us a little bit about the logistics of how it all works. In what circumstances are you called in? Who makes that decision, and what then happens? They make a call to your base. Is that the base where the helicopter is, or you've got a second office somewhere else?
So there is an alarm that goes, special phone and alarm that literally goes in the base. The base is at Henstridge Airfield. We go to only about 0.5% of the ambulance service's workload. So the ambulance service is a vast workload, but we go essentially to the most critical, the worst 0.5%. With the other 4 air ambulances in the southwest region, we co-fund what's called a HEMS desk, a helicopter emergency medicine desk, inside the ambulance service's emergency operations centre. So when someone calls 999 and goes through to the ambulance, they have a call handler, they go into the system, the data is being collected and it's being categorised as what they need. And the HEMS desk, this desk we co-fund, is searching through all those jobs coming in to find the jobs that meet a certain criteria or might require an extra level of care. And they are the ones then that go, okay, this sort of job, we probably need or definitely need or might need a pre-hospital critical care. We need an air ambulance. On top of that, we work very closely with the land crews, so the ambulance crews who arrive on scene, and they will often call for us. They'll arrive somewhere and think, actually, we need another level of care here. This patient probably needs to go to further hospital, or we need to provide blood on scene, or they're going to need some neuroprotection, protection on the brain, so some analgesia or sedation activities, and they'll call us in. And so when that desk presses a button, the information flows directly through to our electronic systems. They'll speak to us as we go out the door. The pilot turns on the helicopter. The medics have a quick chat to the desk. They get on board and they do the rest of the planning on the route to the scene.
And you have a rota of people on standby, presumably during your normal working hours at Henstridge, do you? They're all there waiting for the call to come in.
Yes. So 19 hours a day, we have a critical care team. So we do it in 2 shifts. We start at 7 o'clock in the morning with the first guys come in, a pilot, a co-pilot, a doctor, and at least one critical care practitioner. And we do a handover, I was about to say at 4 o'clock, but it's slightly around 4 o'clock because if they're out on a shift, they have to wait till they come back. And then the second shift come on and they're on standby or being tasked until about 2 o'clock in the morning.
And who works out whether there is somewhere that you can land a helicopter. It's a bit different than taking a land ambulance, isn't it? Because you need a field that hasn't got any wires running through it, and it's got to be relatively flat and good access and all the rest of it. How is that assessment made?
I mean, our pilots are highly experienced. They're all actually, all five of those are ex-military. So they have a level of experience and skills of landing aircraft in different sorts of spaces. There are strict rules about what's big enough. So there's a clear dimensional space, but we are within that allowed to land anywhere that's safe. In daylight hours, actually, one of the pilots or co-pilot en route will check that out on a number of electronic systems. We'll also use a bit of Google Maps, if I'm honest, and go down to Street View, because it's not just getting a field that's big enough, it's making sure that once we've landed in that field, the medics can actually get out of the field and to the location. So there's no point landing at the weekend in a set of school playing pitches, only to find you've got a 9-foot fence all the way around and a locked gate. Over time, they become very experienced about good landing sites, but if it's in our rural counties, a lot of the time, there's often good space. At night, we take slightly longer to get airborne, just a couple more minutes. So before we leave the base and actually go to the aircraft, to make sure that we've got not just one landing site, but a backup and a backup to the backup, because you want to have had a little bit of extra check before you head off. And then when you get into the urban areas such as Poole and Bournemouth, they're quite well known different locations that we can easily fit the aircraft.
The reason for the article particularly is that you are celebrating 25 years. What's changed in that period of time? You've obviously got a better helicopter, you've mentioned that already. Presumably your staff has grown and the number of incidents has obviously grown as well.
Yes, it certainly has. As I said, back in 2000, we were 1 and then 2 pilots and 3 paramedics. It's moved on rather a long way since then. So we introduced an extra level of training for our paramedics in the early teens. We were able to bring some further skills, not just the care in the air. And the doctors who did that ran some tests and found out that actually if we put a doctor on as well, combined with that, we could go even further. So even back in sort of 2015, we were sort of 3 or 4 pilots, 8 or 9 paramedics. We are now at 5 pilots, 5 co-pilots. We've got an engineer that's working at the base. We've got some support staff. We have 18 critical care practitioners. We have 13 consultant doctors, and the support that needs to go around that. And we've gone from daylight only hours. And actually, when we first started 25 years ago, it was a couple of days a week, daylight only. We are now flying in every day, available 19 hours a day, barring the weather or something wrong with the helicopter. So that's taken us from even sort of 10 years ago, we were doing not quite 1,000 missions a year, and now nearly 3,000. We're at 2,900 and still steadily growing in terms of times we get called out.
We've already mentioned the cost of running the service and the fact that you don't receive any central funding, but raising that kind of amount, getting on towards £10 million a year, is more than just shaking some collection tins in Hent Street High Street, isn't it? What are your major fundraising activities? So
we are really fortunate as a charity to have a great groundswell of support across Dorset and Somerset. And I'm hugely grateful. The pilots, the medics repeat their sort of gratitude to the population for enabling them to do a level of care that makes a very acute difference to life or death. So nearly half our money comes in from people either playing our lottery, giving us £1 a week that way, or just having committed to giving us £5 or £10 a month. That's so valuable for a charity because it gives you consistent income that you can plan around. The next main source of income for us at the moment actually is people remembering us in their wills. So people are very generous in remembering us and giving us a gift. And then the last quarter comes from people all over the county doing small things, all big things. You've got some, again, in your magazine, actually, people who've been affected by our service, raising £100, £500, £1,000, £10,000, even £50,000 over a number of years in doing activities, running events, having cake sales, doing challenge events and so forth. That's where the money comes from, really. The people committing to give us a small amount regularly, or doing activities or remembering us in a one-off.
Okay, final question then. What are your plans for the future. And for anybody listening to this who is well disposed to the air ambulance, and I'm sure most people would be, and want to get involved, sure, they could send you a donation. Are there other ways they can get involved?
Yeah, there are. There are a number of ways that, and we're trying to increase the number of ways that people can help. We're always on the lookout for more volunteers. We have about 100 volunteers out and about across Dorset and Somerset who really are our public face of the charity. They attend events, they do presentations, they go and receive checks and really interact. And they're such a vital part of our organisation that assists. So there's opportunity for people to be volunteers. There are opportunities for people to take part in fundraising challenges. We have a couple of events, or people can enlist in other things, and we help them raise funds through doing challenges. Or there's packages of activities people can do. They can do an open garden, they can run tea events, and so forth. So there's a number of ways that people can really support us. And sometimes practically, if you're out and about and you see the air ambulance, making sure if they're in your field, people can get in and out. If they can't land so close and need a lift, that can be helpful as well. One of the biggest ways that we're asking people to help us in our life-saving mission at the moment is to learn basic life support, basic CPR. It makes a vast difference. We go to a lot of cardiac problems, a lot of heart problems. And if they've been a bystander doing chest compressions on a patient, it makes a vast difference, an absolutely vast difference. And that cardiac problem might be a heart attack, but it may be because of an injury or so forth. So we really are asking people to help in that push. We've got people out there doing some training on doing CPR. We also have a scheme of putting defibrillators into the community, because that makes a huge difference.
And briefly, the next 25 years, where are you heading?
Yeah,
onwards and upwards, as the saying goes.
Yeah, the next 25 years, it's wonderful. We mentioned earlier, we get to nearly 3,000 missions a year. And the care and the meeting the patients that we've really helped and saved, it's such a fantastic experience. But there are times when we're not available. So we're not available between 2 and 7. And there are times we fly our helicopter nearly more than anyone else flies this type of helicopter. So things go wrong and it needs to be maintained and so forth. For the next 25 years, we need to be running 2 helicopters. Only one at a time, but you need 2, because you can't fly the same one all the time. We need to purchase a second helicopter. And actually, our base was built for a much smaller helicopter when we were 3 paramedics, 3 pilots and 5 paramedics. And I've told you earlier that we're a much larger organization. I need to make sure that we have the proper facilities for them to operate out of and be able to keep operating out of and operate the 2 helicopters. So we're going to be building a new base, and we're going to be getting a second helicopter. As long as the people of Dorset and Somerset can help us and support us. We have a fundraising challenge, a gap. We've saved money over the last decade, but we still need a couple of £1 million more to allow us to do that, and therefore reach even more patients and keep going for the future.
Charles, it's wonderful work that you do. We wish you well with it. Thank you very much for coming on and talking to us today.
Thanks very much, Terry. It's been a pleasure.
This month's Dorset Insider is entitled Build, Baby, Build, and the Dorset Insider is a no-holds-barred column pulling back the curtain on local affairs with sharp insight, and it is anonymous. So, build, baby, build. The conference room was soon packed as Dorset's parish and town councillors flocked into a recent meeting about the forthcoming changes to planning law. While old friends and colleagues were happy for the opportunity to catch up with each other, most councillors were there to assess the impact of the coming changes on their own patch and how they'd have to communicate that to local residents. Dealing with the occasional NIMBY is one thing, but almost all residents share genuine concerns about how new housing will affect their towns or villages, and particularly its infrastructure. The Dorset Council representatives seem to have had a talking to from the Deputy Prime Minister's office. Planning rules are about to be streamlined to make it easy for homes to be built. Just how easy that is would reveal itself later. Most Dorset residents understand the desperate need for truly affordable housing in the county. The average Dorset wage is £28,000 and the price of the average home is 12 times that number. And it's precisely because Dorset property is so expensive that more homes are required. The current housing target for Dorset is 1,793 units a year, which is about to rise to 3,219 annually. That means that over the next 17 years, Dorset should see an additional 54,725 houses being built. And if no effort is made to reach these targets, the big, bad, baggy green-trousered suited wolf from Westminster will intervene. It's clear that council staff and councillors are under huge pressure to deliver on this ambition, and hopefully it will mean plenty of choice for those looking for affordable homes. While some of the more smug parish councillors sat listening, claiming they lived in an AONB, so were not allowed to build anywhere, don't be so sure, mate, others were more concerned about the necessary supporting infrastructure. We heard from a beleaguered councillor faced with 2,000 units on the edge of a small village. Another area had social housing built, and people from the West Midlands had been shipped in to some of the homes. We heard real concerns about the non-existent public transport, which maroons those living in rural villages unless they can drive. On top of this, at least one new settlement of 10,000 people will be required in each county. Where in Dorset will that land, I wonder? With devolution and the super council seemingly inevitable, if one local authority of a group cannot meet its housing targets, then it must look to others to try to provide a solution. This means a lot of difficult conversations between neighbouring counties and conurbations. Dorset currently has its prescribed 5-year housing supply, but only until October this year. The clock is ticking. As an aside, I noted that among all the talk, there was scarcely a mention of the nature emergency declared by Dorset Council last year. When talk evolved to neighbourhood plans, it became clear that even if a community has one, it would need to be reviewed. Some parishes without a plan wondered whether there was even any point, given the time it takes to go through the process. And does anyone take them into account anyway? Recent developments in the Blandford and Pimperne areas have shown that neighbourhood plans mean nothing at all when a big development is on the way. Neighbourhood planning is essential in order for communities to have a strategy, but it's a highly specialist job. Parish councillors are expected to lead the plan process, but it's very time-consuming. And as we try to encourage more diverse parish councils, we desperately need to move away from the stereotypical retired white middle-class male, we hit the issue that many new councillors have jobs. While they bring a wealth of knowledge, their time to work on major projects is obviously limited. However, the biggest surprise was yet to come. After a long day of chats with the council and various helpful council officers, I had one more meeting in the diary. A team of local developers wanted to engage with the parish council to discuss their plans. Knowing we already have 3 developments progressing in the village, I was hoping this latest one would be a slow burn, even if just to avoid the chaos on our narrow roads and to help us manage demand for housing from locals. How wrong I was. We sat stupefied as a well-developed plan was presented for 94 houses on prime agricultural land in a village of just 1,300 people, almost as a fait accompli. The developers are already talking to the council planning teams and swiftly marching ahead. Not a single member of the council was anticipating 94 more houses on top of what we have already had to absorb. Clearly, there has been no discussion with the local GP surgery or the school, both of which are creaking at the seams. As a council, we now need to fight for the best deal we can for the parish in terms of infrastructure, which is fragile. What might help is if local communities were properly represented. Parish councillors need a seat at the table from the start, not just a flyer, a website link, and a last-minute public consultation in inverted commas. Even a phone call or Zoom meeting with the planners would help. At least then, with an increasing tide of new developments reshaping rural Dorset, we can prepare our communities and feel like we have a say. Instead, parish councils are sidelined in major developments, treated with far less respect or status than they should have. It might also encourage new councillors to come forward for public service in a county where there were gaps of up to 25% on newly elected parish councils last year. And with that, we come to the end of this first episode of the BV podcast for March 2025. Do join us again towards the end of the month for episode 2. Until then, it's goodbye from me, Jenny Devitt.
And until next time, it's goodbye from me, Terry Bennett.